Just moments ago, the October Apple event with the brand new MacBook Pros and some other Apple products just got unveiled, and it was a lot of information, so I'm still processing it all. Blown away and a little bit overwhelmed by how much they gave us in this presentation. I feel like we haven't had this type of Apple event where it was just, well, except for the start, just banger after banger after banger. And so I just wanted to make this video as a little bit of reaction since I took some notes during the event, and I just wanted to tell you guys about the new MacBook Pros and some other products, and then show you what I pre-ordered. All right, so we're gonna go in chronological order of the event. Let's just get the, no offense, boring stuff out of the way. We started with, these are my notes by the way, we got smarter Siri integration with Apple Music, so basically there's more playlists to meet whatever you ask Siri. I don't really know if this is an improvement in Siri or the playlist. It doesn't matter because I don't want to stall any time getting to these new MacBooks. We got a new Apple Music subscription plan. It's called the Voice plan. It's for $4.99, so it's about half the price of the normal individual plan, but you only control it through voice commands, and that's why it's called the Voice plan. So it's cheaper. I think the saving a few extra bucks a month, while it's good for people who really need to save money and still want that vast music library, but I think using it with Siri only might be a little frustrating, but we'll have to see until it comes out. I'm not sure when that comes out. So now we have the $4.99 voice plan and the $9.99 individual plan. We also got brand new HomePod mini colors. We got yellow, orange, and blue available in November. Same price. No updates there, just new colors, so that's cool, I guess, if you use a HomePod mini. Maybe the biggest headline from the music is the brand new 3rd generation regular Airpods, which are basically AirPod Pros, but without the silicon tip, so it's just hard plastic. The charging case looks like AirPod Pros, uses MagSafe to charge, battery life is improved, uses spatial audio, you can listen to it with Dolby Atmos. Whole bunch of improvements there. I think those cost around 180 bucks, so you can buy the AirPods 2 for 130 if you really are on a budget, or you can buy these new pair of AirPods if you still like the hard plastic instead of the silicon tip. I know some people don't like the silicon tip, so if you like the hard plastic but you want an improved pair of AirPods, that is for you. Now we get into the Mac, and this is crazy. I mean, I couldn't keep up with just the amount of data they were throwing at us. They were throwing a lot of numbers at us. I would say this is probably more technical than any other event, but that makes sense because this is for pros. These are for people who actually understand what these numbers mean and can know which product to buy based on them. So it wasn't like a consumer event for the MacBook Air and the lower end MacBook Pros. So to start off, there is two brand new chips. There's the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So this is not what we were expecting. We were just expecting an M1X chip, so not two different chips. It is a 10-core CPU. It's got 8 high-performance cores, 2 high-efficiency cores, and it's offering 70% better performance, CPU performance than M1, which is very, very impressive. The M1 Pro can go up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, which is 2 times the amount you could get with the regular M1. It still runs on a 5nm process. It can go up to 200 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, which is pretty impressive, although I don't really know if that means anything to a lot of people, except for this is a much better chip than M1. It's got 16 GPU cores, which is 2 times the amount of the highest tier M1. If you remember, there's 2 M1 models. There is the 7-core GPU and the 8-core GPU. So the M1 Pro has 2 times better graphics performance than those M1 models. It's got a media engine that is kind of like the Afterburner card you can find in a Mac Pro, which means it accelerates ProRes decoding. I think it just said ProRes acceleration of multiple streams of 4K and 8K. I think they set up to 30 streams of ProRes 422 4K and 7 streams of 422 8K, which is very impressive. There's a display engine, so one of the biggest drawbacks to the M1 was the fact that you could only connect one external display to it, but with the display engine, you can connect more than one display, high resolution displays. I think with the M1 Pro, it might be 3 displays, and the M1 Max, which I'll talk about in a minute, you can hook up more displays, but I'm not a whole lot sure on the amount of displays. I'll show it on the screen now, but that's about it for M1 Pro. That's the big headline features in my opinion. Now let's get on to M1 Max. This is what we were not expecting, a second M1 SKU, if you will. It's built on M1 Pro, so it still has a 10-core CPU, 5 nanometers for that. However, you can go up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, so that is really, really good for professionals. I know there were some leaks saying that there was not going to be a 64 gigabyte of RAM option. I think they got leaks about the M1 Pro, but we weren't expecting the M1 Max, so we do get up to 64 gigabytes of RAM, and that's shared RAM between the GPU and the CPU, because that's what the unified memory is on the Apple SoC. 400 gigabytes of memory bandwidth. Again, don't really know how that translates to real world applications, but it's 2 times the amount of the M1 Pro because 2 times the RAM. We've got still the 10-core CPU. The big difference between the M1 Pro and the M1 Max is the 32-core GPU. Now, this is double the cores from the M1 Pro, which is 16 to 32. So you are getting double the performance from M1 Pro to M1 Max and 4 times the performance from the normal M1, which is seriously, seriously impressive. You get a faster decoding and encoding engine that can just do more ProRes streams. It can do faster H.264 and H.265 encoding and decoding, if I remember correctly. And then they started showing us performance per watt graphs. Now, these graphs, they're not the clearest. They did show us what laptops they were comparing it to this time, and they said that M1 uses a lot less power compared to a Windows laptop with a discrete GPU like a Razer Blade 15 is, I believe, the computer they were comparing it against. M1 is a lot more power efficient performance per watt wise, which we already knew from M1, comparing that to Intel chips. So it is the same story here with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, a lot more power efficient than x86 type chips. And I don't really want to go into the numbers because, again, it could be faux. Last time with M1, they just said, hey, look, M1 is a lot more efficient than a Windows laptop. And we were like, what Windows laptop? So I don't really want to touch on those graphs because I think we're going to leave it to people like Notebook Check to give us more scientific testing rather than the kind of vague graphs that they showed us in the keynote. And in the notes here with M1 Max, you do get 4 external displays, so I think M1 Pro is 3. macOS, there's more optimization. They use those high performance cores versus the high efficiency cores. Again, there's 8 high performance and 2 high efficiency in both the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. There's much better machine learning performance, even though real machine learning happens still on GPUs. I don't think these all-in-one SoCs are going to be able to rival a dedicated NVIDIA GPU, especially for machine learning, where the CUDA technology is so good and so widely used with stuff like TensorFlow, which I don't even think is built for M1 yet. So even though that's really, really good, they're pushing forth Core ML, which is Apple's machine learning technology. It's not really gonna take over NVIDIA's market share for machine learning, in my opinion. Now that's enough about the chips. That's kind of the quick and dirty about those chips. Let's talk about the brand new design of the MacBooks, which I'm a super big fan of. So I just got a list because this is where I was just trying to make all the observations I could about this MacBook. Let's talk about how it has MagSafe 3, which I saw is MagSafe on one end but USB-C on the other end. So you can use your chargers from last generation MacBooks, if they're enough wattage, on these brand new M1 Pro and M1 Max laptops, as long as you have the USB-C to MagSafe 3 connector. There's the return of HDMI and SD card, which I cannot even believe. I mean, they talked about, guys, we're finally bringing ports back. I think they're acknowledging in a way that USB-C just didn't catch on as much as they thought it would with the 2016 generation of MacBook Pro. With just 4 USB-C, it just wasn't enough for professionals, especially on the go. They got rid of the touch bar. We have a normal full-size function key up there, which is going to be good for programmers. We have a 14-inch and 16-inch model. So the 16-inch model is pretty much the same. The 14-inch is not replacing the 13-inch. You can still buy that, but now we have a 14-inch and 16-inch model. The bezel is way less, and I think you get a little bit more screen. I think on the Intel MacBook Pro 16, you got 16.1 inches. They were able to squeeze a little bit more. They were able to get 16.2 inches of screen on the 16-inch, and I don't remember what it was on the 14-inch, but it's pretty impressive given the size. The actual design reminds me of the first Intel MacBook Pro, if you remember what those were like. It's more boxy, it's reminiscent of the iPhone 13, the iPhone 12. I really dig it. I think it's really sharp, I think it's clean. It doesn't deviate too far from what we know, but it is a cleanup, if you will, of that. It was an aging design, it was a classic, but to get something new-ish is really nice, and it's still familiar, but as I said again, new. Now, even though these chips are still crazy efficient, they are outputting more heat, so we have an improved thermal system for sustained performance, which is going to be good for things like video encoding that is long and a sustained high load, so you're going to need good thermal performance for that. The 16-inch comes in at 16.8 millimeters thin and 4.7 pounds. I can't remember if that's thicker than the MacBook Pro 16 it's replacing, but honestly, I don't care because we have much more usability in this laptop with the ports, with the no touch bar, and the MagSafe, so I really don't care, and I think Apple is trying to realize that they don't have to make everything thinner on each iteration, because at some point you're going to sacrifice too much usability to even please your loyal Pro customers. The 14-inch comes in at 15.5 millimeters thin and 3.5 pounds, so obviously a lot more portable. I wouldn't say that these are both really heavy laptops, especially not the 14-inch, but definitely the 16-inch is going to take probably a backpack. You're not going to slip that into a camera bag, whereas a 14-inch, you probably could slip that into a camera bag. It's going to be lighter. It's going to be better if you're on the go a lot, but the 16-inch is not a bad option either. We still have 3 USB-C ports. I think they're all Thunderbolt 4, but there are some Thunderbolt ports for sure. I'm pretty sure they are all Thunderbolt 4, which is cool. You can charge using the Thunderbolt ports or the MagSafe ports, and we'll touch on charging in a second because there is some improvement coming in that area. There is now a Touch ID sensor, or what am I saying? There's always been a Touch ID sensor on these laptops, but it's more reminiscent of what we saw on the iMac keyboard that comes with the M1 iMac. It looks like that. We have a notch, which sounds terrible, but in the fact that macOS has a menu bar, I don't think it's a big deal. I actually think it's a really clever use of space. This is actually probably how they got the more screen real estate. They went from 16.1 to 16.2 inches, is the fact that there's a notch now, so the notch just cuts into the menu bar, and I'm actually a-okay with that because that was pretty wasted screen real estate anyway. Now, something else that's pretty huge, and I didn't believe it at first because we had heard the same rumors for months. We heard about M1X. It's going to be 10 cores. We're going to have maybe this much RAM, this many GPU cores. We heard that for a long time, and then after Apple announced this event, all of a sudden we got this leak that there might be ProMotion displays, 120 hertz displays, which I was like, they're just trying to get their 2 minutes of fame, but it actually happened. There's a 120 hertz ProMotion display. I think it's Liquid Retina XDR. So really sharp display, 1600 nits of peak brightness, 1000 nits of sustained brightness, really bright screen, 1080p camera up top. Thank God we said goodbye to the 720p webcam. That was frankly trash. And we have the processing enabled by the M1 Pro and Max chips. We have a better audio system, which is really impressive because I thought the 16-inch was already the best laptop with the speakers, but we're going to have a 6-speaker sound system. Who knows how many we had on the Intel MacBook Pro, but I assume this is going to be better. It's going to be louder. It's going to be fuller sound. Obviously, we don't know these kind of things until we actually get our hands on this laptop, but something to just be aware of and look forward to. Now, just for some miscellaneous announcement, the SSD is quicker, up to 7.4 gigabytes per second of transfer speed, which they claim is a 2 times improvement from the previous generation of laptops. So if you're editing very high bitrate, probably multicam high bitrate footage, that will be really good for you. As I said, we're going to talk about charging. There's now fast charging on the Mac. I can't remember if they said how much charge you can get in 30 minutes or an hour, but they said there's now fast charging, so hopefully that will decrease the charge time that it will take to charge up at least the first 50% of the MacBook, which is where you actually need the quickest charge time. If it's dead and you got to run to class, and you can plug it in for like 10 minutes and you can have some charge, and that'll be all cool and good. Now, everything was awesome about this laptop. The design, the chips, the screen, the ports, all this stuff has just been good. The one not good thing, obviously, is the price. And I found myself in the middle of the keynote. I was like, this is awesome. And I was like, wait, this is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. And definitely Apple knows that they have a hot product on their hand and they want to make some money. So the 14-inch is starting at $19.99. That comes with the M1 Pro. It comes with 512 gigabytes of storage, which I think is a little low for a $2,000 device, given that this is meant for professionals. So professionals, you know, raw video recording is available on normal cameras now, like the Panasonic S1H mirrorless cameras, Blackmagic cameras. There's more inexpensive RED cameras now that are much more accessible. People are going to be shooting raw video. People are going to be shooting uncompressed raw photographs, and they just need, in my opinion, more space than 512 gigabytes. So the fact that that's how much you get paying $2,000 seems a little unfair to me, but that's besides the point. The 16-inch starts at $2,500. I believe that's also 512 gigabytes of storage. It's also the M1 Pro. I'm gonna have all the basic configurations on the screen now that shows on the Apple Store. Pretty crazy. It is definitely very expensive, and I think that's why they did not straight out replace the 13-inch with the 14-inch. You can still buy a 13-inch if you want a MacBook Pro, but you don't want to fork out $2,000. You can buy a 13 grand M1 computer, and you can still have some Apple Silicon on a MacBook Pro. Now, that is pretty much all the notes I had, and I think I've made it pretty clear that I was super impressed by this event. I mean, watching it, I was just like, I don't remember any time, especially in the past 5 years, where they just had hit after hit after hit after hit. I mean, the Pro Motion, the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, the ports, the screen, the new design. There's just nothing that made me go, I wish there was blank. Now, some people might want a touchscreen on a Mac. I don't really think so. I think that's what an iPad is for, but I think if you weren't expecting touchscreen on a Mac, which I don't think many people were realistically expecting that, then they pretty much gave everything that every professional could have wanted. Now, as I said, the price is pretty high, but if the performance that they're talking about is real and tangible, they had some developers come on, they had someone from Adobe Premiere come on and talk about how much quicker the create caption was when you had a guy from DaVinci Resolve saying 4 times quicker exporting and this and that, and it was just kind of funny that Adobe Premiere is really not that well optimized for M1. It is quicker than Intel, but nowhere near the speed of Final Cut and Resolve, so that's why I no longer use Premiere, and I've switched to Resolve and Final Cut. These are workloads that just scale really nicely with more cores and more memory, so it definitely made a lot of professionals happy. Now, as for the pre-order, oh, how about that? There is an 8-core CPU, 14-core GPU. Oh, there's way more SKUs than I thought. Okay, well, damn. You can see starting at $19.99, actually gets you an 8-core CPU. I think I messed that up earlier. I said 10-core, my bad. But basically, after this tier, if you step up to the $2,500 tier, you basically get 10 cores all the way, 10 core, 10 core, 10 core. So that is the options for the 14-inch. Now, what I actually was really surprised about is that if we configure this 14-inch, that you can actually go all the way up to the M1 Max with the 32-core GPU and the 16-core neural engine. People were not thinking that they could fit the 32-core GPU and the 10-core CPU into the 14-inch, so they must hopefully have the thermals in check, but you can upgrade if you really love the 14-inch form factor, but you want the most power that you can get. There should be no performance difference between the 16-inch version with the M1 Max, 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, and the 14-inch. You have to select the M1 Max if you want 64 gigs of memory. That's going to run you a cool $400. Given the price that you're paying, even though that is a lot of money, I think that you can finally say, you know, with the Apple software, with the kind of premium price that Apple Silicon has, I think it's worth it. I don't think this is actually too uncompetitive with something like a Razer Blade Studio. I think this will actually trade blows with a computer like that. But that is pretty much it for the 14-inch options. If we go back to the 16-inch options, basically, yeah, as I said, you can start off with a 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU, 16 gigabyte of RAM, and 512 SSD. I think the 512 SSD is kind of low, but you know, whatever. And that runs you $2,500 for 200 more bucks. You can upgrade the SSD. So, you know, I guess at that point, what's another 200 bucks, even though That's not really the right mentality to have. But the first M1 Macs, this is like their mass-produced models. If you don't want to go into the custom configurator, you want to go into the Apple Store, you just want to buy one, which they're not in Apple stores yet, but in the future, you know, just go into the Apple Store, buy one. You can get this 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, M1 Max, 32 gigabytes of unified memory, 1 terabytes of SSD storage for $3,500. I think you can justify the cost of these machines more than you could the previous Intel machines. I think these are really going to trade blows with, you know, things like Razer laptops with NVIDIA GPUs in them using CUDA acceleration. I think this is definitely going to give those laptops a run for their money. And I think the main difference right now is, especially if you want to compare this to something like building your own desktop, this is going to be available, and building your own desktop is pretty hard right now, especially with the GPU. So if you factor in MSRP, these might look not as good as a value as building your own desktop, although I don't think anything is going to beat out that kind of value. But right now, and it seems like it's not ending anytime soon, it's going to be hard for you to get your hands on some of the components like a GPU, which is scalped still like 3 times the price, which is ridiculous. So these computers, I think, are going to look appealing to a lot of people who need a computer right now. And especially professionals who might be on a 10 series GPU, who just want more power right now but couldn't get their hands on an NVIDIA RTX card. They might go to the Apple Store and buy one of these. Now, I do want to tell you guys what configuration I bought. It is a lot of money. I saved for a long time, and also I got a student discount. This is kind of deja vu. A year ago, I unboxed a 16-inch. I returned that, actually, so cool. But I got the M1 Max 16-inch option, the 10-core CPU, the 32-core GPU, 32 gigs of RAM, terabyte SSD. That is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, that is a lot of money. But then again, also, I want to see what that 32-core GPU does in applications like DaVinci Resolve, like Final Cut Pro, which I use all the time, and I think it's worth the extra money for the amount of time I'm gonna have this laptop, which is going to be a long time. Other thing is, I'm just really excited for this laptop. You know, I think Apple Silicon is definitely really impressive on the battery life, on the performance, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more money to get a laptop with the software I like using. Nothing against Windows, but I just like using Mac OS more. It kind of gets out of my way and I can just work. And it is aging my, you can kind of see in the frame right here, is my 13-inch MacBook Pro 2015 base model. So definitely, you know, if I've gotten 6 years out of this, I'm gonna get a whole heck of a lot more years out of this kind of machine. So look forward to an unboxing and first impressions. Definitely look forward to some performance tests. I'm going to try to get those out as soon as possible. This was a different style video. I just wanted to get this out. I want to get my reactions out. So that's pretty much all for this reaction video to Apple's October event. This is probably their last event for the year, and I think they ended it on a super duper high note. Now people are going to start talking about M2 and what's coming to the new MacBook Air. I think we have a lot to look forward to with these laptops. So thank you guys for watching, and I will definitely see you guys in the next video.